Jeremy Gutierrez stared at his phone screen, his thumb hovering over the keyboard as his heart hammered against his ribs. The text message glowed in the darkness of his bedroom, simple words that had become the most important part of his day. "Good night, Jeremy. Sweet dreams." The cursor blinked in the reply box, waiting for his response, just like Andrew Watson was waiting somewhere across town in his own bed, phone probably resting on his chest as he watched for that familiar notification. This had become their ritual over the past 3 months, this nightly exchange that felt like so much more than friendship. Andrew would text first, always the same gentle words, and then he would wait. Jeremy knew he waited because of the timestamps, because of the way Andrew's response would come within seconds of Jeremy's reply, as if he had been holding his breath until that moment. Jeremy typed slowly, his fingers trembling slightly. "Good night, Andrew. Sleep well." He hit send and immediately saw the three dots appear, then disappear, then appear again. His chest tightened with anticipation. "Thank you," came Andrew's reply. "I always do when I know you're thinking of me." The words hit Jeremy like a physical blow, stealing his breath and making his world tilt on its axis. This was new territory, this admission that crossed the careful line they had been walking for months. Jeremy set his phone on his nightstand with shaking hands and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to make sense of the hurricane of emotions swirling through him. But to understand how they had arrived at this moment, how a simple good night text had become the thread connecting two hearts across the darkness, you would have to go back to the beginning. You would have to go back to that September evening when Andrew Watson first walked into Jeremy's life and changed everything without either of them realizing it. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you are watching from and hype this video in the comments. It had started innocently enough, the way most life-changing friendships do. Jeremy had been struggling with his calculus homework at the campus library, surrounded by crumpled papers and empty coffee cups, when a shadow fell across his textbook. He looked up to find a tall guy with sandy brown hair and the kind of smile that made Jeremy's stomach do unexpected somersaults. "I'm Andrew," the stranger had said, gesturing to the chair across from Jeremy. "Mind if I sit? This place is packed tonight." Jeremy had nodded, not trusting his voice, and watched as Andrew settled into the chair with an easy confidence that Jeremy envied. Andrew was the kind of person who seemed to belong everywhere he went, who could strike up conversations with strangers and make them feel like old friends within minutes. They had started talking about calculus, then moved on to their majors, their hometowns, their favorite movies. The conversation flowed as naturally as breathing, and Jeremy found himself laughing more than he had in months. When the library announced its closing time, Jeremy felt a sharp pang of disappointment. "We should study together again," Andrew had said, pulling out his phone. "What's your number?" Jeremy had given it to him without hesitation, telling himself it was just about studying, just about having someone to work through problem sets with. But even then, even in that first moment, he had felt the spark of something deeper. The first text had come 2 days later. "Hey, it's Andrew from the library. Want to grab coffee before our calculus study session?" Jeremy had stared at the message for a full 5 minutes before responding, his heart racing for reasons he couldn't quite name. "Sure," he had typed back, when and where. That coffee had led to another and another. Study sessions became regular hangouts. Jeremy learned that Andrew was majoring in engineering, that he came from a small town in Ohio, that he had a girlfriend named Sarah back home who he called every Sunday night. Jeremy learned to ignore the way his chest tightened every time Sarah's name came up in conversation. Andrew was straight. Andrew had a girlfriend. Andrew was just being friendly, the way some people naturally were. Jeremy told himself these things over and over, building walls around his growing feelings and pretending they didn't exist. But the walls began to crumble the night Andrew showed up at Jeremy's dorm room at 11:30, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his eyes red-rimmed. "Sarah and I had a fight," Andrew had said when Jeremy opened the door. "A big one. Can I come in?" Jeremy had stepped aside immediately, watching as Andrew collapsed onto his desk chair and buried his face in his hands. Jeremy had never seen him like this, so vulnerable and broken. It made Jeremy want to cross the small space between them and wrap Andrew in his arms, but he stayed frozen by the door. "What happened?" Jeremy had asked softly. Andrew had laughed bitterly. "She wants me to transfer schools, move back to Ohio after this semester so we can be together." She says long distance isn't working, that I'm different now, that I don't call enough or text enough or miss her enough. Jeremy's heart had started beating faster. Do you? He had asked carefully. Miss her enough. Andrew had looked up then, his eyes meeting Jeremy's across the small room. That's the problem, he had said quietly. I don't think I do. I don't think I have for a while now. They had talked until 3 in the morning. Andrew curled up on Jeremy's bed while Jeremy sat in the desk chair, maintaining a careful distance, even as every fiber of his being wanted to close the gap between them. Andrew had talked about feeling like he was playing a role, like he was saying the words Sarah wanted to hear without really meaning them. He talked about feeling disconnected, like he was going through the motions of a relationship without understanding why. I keep thinking there's something wrong with me, Andrew had whispered in the darkness. Like I'm broken somehow. Like I don't know how to love someone the way I'm supposed to. You're not broken, Jeremy had said fiercely, the words escaping before he could stop them. You're one of the best people I know, Andrew. Any girl would be lucky to have you care about her. But Andrew had just shaken his head. Sometimes I wonder if it's not about the girl at all, he had said so quietly that Jeremy almost missed it. Sometimes I wonder if the problem is that I'm looking for the wrong things entirely. Jeremy's breath had caught in his throat, but before he could respond, Andrew had fallen asleep, curled up on Jeremy's bed like he belonged there. Jeremy had spent the rest of the night in the chair, watching Andrew sleep and trying to decode the meaning behind his words. The next morning, Andrew had been embarrassed, apologizing for falling asleep and for dumping his relationship problems on Jeremy. But something had shifted between them that night. Some invisible barrier had been lowered. Andrew started coming by Jeremy's room more often, usually with some excuse about studying or borrowing notes, but Jeremy began to suspect the real reason was something neither of them was ready to name. Their friendship deepened over the following weeks. They developed inside jokes, shared meals, spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Jeremy learned that Andrew hummed when he was concentrating, that he always ordered his coffee with an extra shot of vanilla, that he had a small scar on his left hand from falling off his bike when he was 7. More importantly, Jeremy began to notice the way Andrew looked at him sometimes, when he thought Jeremy wasn't paying attention. There was something in those glances, something soft and wondering, that made Jeremy's pulse quicken. But every time he thought he might be reading the signs correctly, Andrew would mention Sarah, or talk about their plans for winter break, and Jeremy would remember his place. The breakthrough came in November, on a night when the first snow of the season was falling outside Jeremy's window. They had been studying for their physics exam, textbooks spread across Jeremy's bed, when Andrew had suddenly closed his book and turned to face Jeremy. Can I ask you something, Andrew had said, his voice unusually serious. Jeremy had nodded, setting aside his own textbook and giving Andrew his full attention. Have you ever kissed a guy, Andrew had asked, the words tumbling out in a rush. Jeremy's heart had stopped. He had stared at Andrew, trying to read his expression in the lamplight. I have, he had said carefully. Why? Andrew had been quiet for a long moment, his fingers playing with the corner of his textbook. I keep thinking about it, he had said finally, wondering what it would be like, if it would be different. Different how? Jeremy had asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Andrew had looked up then, his eyes meeting Jeremy's with an intensity that made Jeremy's breath catch. I don't know, he had said. Just different. Better, maybe. The air between them had crackled with tension, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Jeremy had felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, one step away from either flying or falling. You could find out, Jeremy had said softly, the words escaping before his rational mind could stop them. Andrew's eyes had widened. You mean? Jeremy had nodded, his heart hammering so hard he was sure Andrew could hear it. If you want to, Andrew had moved then, closing the distance between them on the bed until their knees were touching. His hand had reached up to cup Jeremy's face, thumb brushing across his cheekbone with infinite gentleness. I've been thinking about this for weeks, Andrew had whispered. About you, about us. And then he had leaned forward and pressed his lips to Jeremy's, soft and tentative at first, then with growing confidence as Jeremy responded. The kiss had been everything Jeremy had dreamed it would be and more, sweet and electric and right in a way that made his entire world realign. When they had finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Andrew had rested his forehead against Jeremy's. Wow, Andrew had whispered. Yeah, Jeremy had agreed, his voice shaky. Wow. They had kissed again, longer this time, Andrew's hands tangling in Jeremy's hair as Jeremy pulled him closer. When they broke apart the second time, Andrew's eyes were bright with wonder and something that looked like relief. I think I understand now, Andrew had said softly. What was missing? Why nothing ever felt right before? Jeremy had felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. What are you saying? He had asked. Andrew had smiled then, the kind of smile that could have powered the entire campus. I'm saying I think I've been looking for the wrong things my entire life, he had said. I'm saying I think I've been looking for girls when I should have been looking for you. The confession had hit Jeremy like a tidal wave, washing away months of doubt and uncertainty. You mean it, he had asked, needing to hear it again. Andrew had kissed him in response, pouring all of his certainty and newfound understanding into the contact. When they separated, he had cupped Jeremy's face in both hands. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Andrew had said. I think I'm falling in love with you, Jeremy Gutierrez. Jeremy had laughed then, a sound caught somewhere between joy and relief. I think I've been in love with you since the night we met, he had admitted. I just never thought you could feel the same way. Andrew had pulled him close then, holding him tight against his chest. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure it out, he had whispered into Jeremy's hair. I'm sorry you had to wait for me to catch up. Jeremy had pulled back to look at him. You're worth waiting for, he had said simply. You're worth everything. They had spent the rest of the night talking, sharing stories and fears and dreams. Andrew had called Sarah the next morning to end things officially, a conversation that was difficult but necessary. He had been honest about his realization, about understanding that he was gay and that he couldn't keep pretending otherwise. Sarah had been hurt, of course, but she had also been relieved. She had admitted that she had felt the distance between them growing, that she had sensed Andrew's heart wasn't fully in their relationship. The breakup had been all but clean, without the messy complications Jeremy had feared. The weeks that followed had been a whirlwind of discovery. They had taken things slowly, learning each other in new ways, exploring this shift from friendship to something deeper. Andrew had been nervous about being with a man for the first time, but Jeremy had been patient, letting Andrew set the pace. They had kept their relationship quiet at first, not out of shame, but out of a desire to protect something precious and new. They would study together in Jeremy's room, sharing soft kisses between problem sets. They would walk across campus together, their hand brushing but not quite holding. They would sit closer than friends in the dining hall, their knees touching under the table. It was during this period that their nightly texting ritual had begun. Andrew had started sending goodnight messages, simple words that carried the weight of everything they couldn't yet say in public. Jeremy would respond, and they would exchange a few more messages before sleep, creating a bridge across the darkness between their separate dorm rooms. The messages had gradually become more intimate, more revealing. Andrew would text about missing Jeremy's smile, about counting the hours until they could see each other again. Jeremy would respond with equal tenderness, sharing his own feelings of longing and affection. Good night, beautiful, Andrew would write. Dream of me. Always do, Jeremy would respond. Sweet dreams, love. The endearments had crept in slowly, natural as breathing. Love, beautiful sweetheart. Words that felt right on their tongues and in their messages, words that spoke to the depth of feeling growing between them. By December, they were inseparable. They studied together, ate together, spent hours walking around campus talking about everything and nothing. Jeremy's friends had started to notice the change in him, the way he smiled more, the way he seemed lighter and happier than they had ever seen him. You're glowing, his roommate Tyler Howard had said one evening, looking up from his own textbooks. Seriously, man, you look like you won the lottery or something. What's going on? Jeremy had blushed, not ready to share the truth but unable to hide his happiness completely. Just having a good semester, he had said. Tyler had raised an eyebrow but hadn't pushed, though Jeremy caught him watching sometimes with a knowing smile. Jeremy suspected Tyler had figured out at least part of the truth, but his roommate was respectful enough not to pry. The real test had come when Andrew suggested they spend New Year's Eve together. Not with a group, not at a party, but just the two of them. Jeremy had agreed without hesitation, but as the date approached, he found himself nervous about what it might mean. They had decided to stay in Jeremy's room, ordering pizza and watching movies. Tyler was going home for the break, so they would have privacy. As midnight approached, Jeremy found himself watching the clock, wondering if Andrew was thinking the same thing he was. When the countdown began on the television, Andrew had turned to face Jeremy on the bed, his expression soft and serious. 10, 9, 8, the crowd on TV chanted. Jeremy, Andrew had said quietly, his hand reaching for Jeremy's face. 7, 6, 5. I love you, Andrew had whispered. 4, 3, 2. I love you too, Jeremy had whispered back. 1. Happy New Year. Their kiss at midnight had been perfect, sweet, and full of promise. When they separated, both were smiling through tears. Best New Year's ever, Andrew had said, pulling Jeremy close. Jeremy had agreed, settling into Andrew's arms and feeling like he was exactly where he belonged. They had fallen asleep together that night, curled up in Jeremy's narrow dorm bed, and Jeremy had woken up to find Andrew watching him with a soft smile. Good morning, beautiful, Andrew had whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Jeremy's forehead. Good morning, Jeremy had replied, his heart full to bursting with happiness. That morning had marked a new phase in their relationship. They stopped hiding, stopped pretending they were just friends. They held hands walking across campus, shared quick kisses between classes, and Jeremy felt like he was living in a dream. The nightly texting ritual continued, but now it carried even deeper meaning. They were together most days, but the messages had become a way of saying all the things they couldn't express during their busy days of classes and studying. I love watching you concentrate in the library, Andrew would text. You get this little wrinkle between your eyebrows, and it's the most adorable thing I've ever seen. You make me feel like I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be, Jeremy would respond. I never knew I could be this happy. Their messages became love letters, small poems of affection that they saved and reread during difficult days. Jeremy had screenshots of his favorites saved in a special folder on his phone, a collection of Andrew's words that he treasured more than any gift. Spring semester brought new challenges. They were both taking heavier course loads, and Andrew had started worrying about telling his parents about their relationship. His family was conservative, religious, and he wasn't sure how they would react to learning their son was gay. Jeremy had been patient, understanding Andrew's fears, while also gently encouraging him to be honest with his family. They had talked for hours about coming out, about the risks and the relief that could come with living authentically. I'm scared they'll reject me, Andrew had admitted one night, his head on Jeremy's shoulder as they lay in bed together. I'm scared they'll think I'm broken or sick or going through a phase. Jeremy had run his fingers through Andrew's hair, offering what comfort he could. If they love you, they'll want you to be happy, he had said softly. And you are happy, aren't you? Andrew had lifted his head to look at Jeremy, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Happier than I've ever been in my life, he had said. You make me feel like I'm home, Jeremy. Like I've been wandering around, lost my whole life, and finally found where I belong. The conversation had led to another milestone in their relationship. Andrew had made the decision to tell his parents during spring break, and Jeremy had offered to be there for support if needed. In the end, Andrew had made the call alone from Jeremy's room, with Jeremy sitting nearby offering silent encouragement. The conversation with Andrew's parents had been difficult, but ultimately successful. His mother had cried, his father had been quiet, but both had expressed their love for their son and their desire to understand. It would take time, Andrew's mother had said, but they would work through it as a family. Andrew had collapsed into Jeremy's arms after the call, shaking with relief and emotional exhaustion. Jeremy had held him close, whispering words of pride and love and support. You did it, Jeremy had said softly. You were so brave, love. I couldn't have done it without you, Andrew had replied, his voice muffled against Jeremy's neck. You make me brave, Jeremy. You make me want to be the best version of myself. The semester had continued with its ups and downs, but their relationship had grown stronger with each challenge they faced together. They supported each other through difficult exams, celebrated each other's successes, and built a life together that felt natural and right. The nightly texting ritual had evolved too, becoming less about bridging physical distance and more about emotional connection. Even when they were together during the day, the messages served as bookends to their time apart, a way of saying goodnight that felt intimate and special. I love falling asleep knowing you're thinking of me, Andrew would text. I love waking up to your good morning messages, Jeremy would respond. Sweet dreams, my love, Andrew would write. Sweet dreams, sweetheart, Jeremy would reply. The messages had become a language unto themselves, a private communication that belonged only to them. Jeremy treasured each one, the way they made him feel connected to Andrew, even in sleep. As spring turned to summer, they faced the challenge of being apart for the first time since they had gotten together. Jeremy was staying on campus for summer classes, while Andrew was going home to Ohio to work and spend time with his family. The prospect of separation was daunting, but they were determined to make it work. The night before Andrew left for home, they had spent hours together in Jeremy's room, memorizing each other's faces and voices. They had made plans for visits, for phone calls, for care packages. But most importantly, they had promised to continue their nightly ritual. No matter what, Andrew had said, holding Jeremy close, I'll text you goodnight every single night, and I'll wait for your reply. Promise, Jeremy had asked. I promise, Andrew had said, sealing it with a kiss. The first few weeks of separation had been harder than either of them had anticipated. They talked on the phone every day, texted constantly, and video chatted whenever they could. But nothing quite filled the Andrew-shaped hole in Jeremy's daily life. The goodnight text became even more important during this time, a constant that anchored them both. No matter how busy their days were, no matter what challenges they faced, they knew they could count on those few moments of connection before sleep. I miss you so much it physically hurts, Andrew would text. I know exactly what you mean, Jeremy would respond, counting down the days until I see you again. Only 43 more days, Andrew would write. But who's counting, Jeremy would tease back. The countdown had become part of their routine, a way of making the separation feel manageable. Every night, Andrew would include the number of days remaining in his goodnight message, and Jeremy would respond with some variation of encouragement or shared anticipation. 37 more days, love. I'm dreaming of holding you again. 37 days too many, Jeremy would reply, but we can do this. The messages had sustained them through the long weeks apart, creating a bridge across the miles that kept them connected. When Andrew finally returned to campus in August, their reunion had been everything they had dreamed it would be. Jeremy had waited outside Andrew's dorm building, pacing nervously as he watched for the familiar car. When Andrew had finally appeared, climbing out of his parents' sedan with his bikes and his brilliant smile, Jeremy had felt his heart soar. They had run to each other across the parking lot, colliding in a fierce embrace that lasted several minutes. Jeremy had breathed in Andrew's familiar scent, felt the solid warmth of his body, and known that everything was right with the world again. I missed you so much, Andrew had whispered against Jeremy's ear. Never again, Jeremy had whispered back. We're never spending that long apart again. They had spent the rest of the day reacquainting themselves with each other's presence, talking and laughing and sharing all the stories that hadn't quite translated over phone calls. That night, they had fallen asleep together in Jeremy's bed, and Jeremy had felt complete for the first time in months. The goodnight texts had continued even when they were together, a habit too precious to break. They would lie in bed together, each with their own phone, sending those familiar messages even though they were only inches apart. Good night, beautiful, Andrew would text. Good night, love, Jeremy would text back. Then they would set their phones aside and fall asleep in each other's arms, smiling at the sweetness of their ritual. Their second year together had brought new depths to their relationship. They moved in together off campus, a small apartment that they filled with shared books and inside jokes and the comfortable detritus of a life built together. They adopted a cat, a small orange tabby they named Sunshine, who seemed to understand that she was part of a family. The goodnight texts evolved again in their shared space, becoming more playful and intimate. They would text each other from different rooms of their small apartment, silly messages that made them both laugh. Good night from the kitchen, Andrew would text while Jeremy brushed his teeth in the bathroom. Good night from the land of minty freshness, Jeremy would respond. The ritual had become so ingrained in their relationship that Jeremy couldn't imagine sleeping without it. Even when they were lying side by side, the exchange of messages felt necessary, a verbal hug that prepared them both for sleep. As they settled into their life together, the messages became a way of expressing gratitude for their relationship, for the love they had found in each other. They would text about the small moments that had made their day special, the ways they had noticed each other caring and loving and supporting. Thank you for making coffee this morning, Andrew would text. Thank you for being patient when I was stressed about my presentation. Thank you for loving me exactly as I am. Thank you for existing, Jeremy would respond. Thank you for choosing me every day. Thank you for making my life beautiful. The messages had become a practice of appreciation, a daily acknowledgement of the gift they had found in each other. Jeremy treasured each one, the way they helped him see their relationship through Andrew's eyes, the way they reminded him daily of how lucky he was. Their friends had started to notice the ritual, teasing them gently about their devotion to their phones at bedtime. But Jeremy didn't care about the teasing. The messages were sacred to him, a private language of love that belonged only to them. As their relationship matured, so did their understanding of what they meant to each other. They talked about the future, about careers and dreams and the life they wanted to build together. They talked about marriage, about children, about growing old together. And through it all, the goodnight text remained a constant, a daily affirmation of their commitment to each other. I want to text you goodnight for the rest of my life, Andrew had said one evening as they lay in bed together. Just good night, Jeremy had teased, not good morning too. Andrew had laughed, pulling Jeremy closer. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I want to text you every moment of every day for the rest of our lives. The conversation had led to deeper discussions about their future, about the ways they wanted to grow together and support each other through whatever life brought them. They had talked about the challenges they might face, the joys they hoped to share, the legacy they wanted to leave behind. Through it all, the goodnight texts had remained their anchor, the daily practice that kept them connected even when life got complicated or stressful. No matter what happened during the day, they knew they could count on those few moments of tenderness before sleep. The ritual had become so important to Jeremy that he had started saving every message, creating a digital archive of their love story. He had thousands of them now, a collection that spanned years and captured the evolution of their relationship from tentative friendship to deep, abiding love. Reading through the old messages was like reading a novel, Jeremy thought sometimes. The story of two people finding each other and choosing each other and building a life together. One goodnight text at a time. Some of the messages were simple, just the basic exchange of goodnight wishes. Others were longer, more elaborate expressions of love and gratitude and hope. But all of them were precious to Jeremy, small treasures that he would keep forever. Good night, my love, Andrew had texted just the night before. Thank you for another perfect day of being us. Good night, sweetheart, Jeremy had responded. Here's to a lifetime more. The messages had become a promise, a daily renewal of their commitment to each other and to the love they had built. They were a reminder that love wasn't just the big moments, the dramatic gestures and grand declarations. Love was also the small, daily choices, the simple acts of care and attention that built a relationship one day at a time. Jeremy thought about this as he lay in bed now, his phone warm in his hands as he read Andrew's latest message. I always do when I know you're thinking of me. The words carried so much weight, so much history, so much love. He typed his response slowly, wanting to get it exactly right. I'm always thinking of you, he wrote, every moment of every day. You're my first thought when I wake up and my last thought before I sleep. The three dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Jeremy smiled, knowing that Andrew was crafting his response with the same care Jeremy had used. And you're mine, came Andrew's reply. You're my everything, Jeremy Gutierrez. My best friend, my lover, my partner, my home. I love you more than words can express. Jeremy felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. The same overwhelming emotion he had felt that first night when Andrew had kissed him and changed both of their lives forever. I love you too, he typed back. More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. Sweet dreams, my beautiful man, Andrew texted. Sweet dreams, my love, Jeremy replied. Jeremy set his phone on his nightstand and settled into his pillow, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. In the apartment next door, he knew Andrew was doing the same thing, settling into sleep with a smile and a heart full of love. The goodnight text had started as a simple ritual, a way of staying connected across the distance between their dorm rooms. But they had become so much more than that. They had become a language of love, a daily practice of gratitude, a bridge that connected two hearts across any distance. Jeremy closed his eyes and let sleep take him, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of Loa and laughter and shared life with Andrew. And tomorrow night would bring another goodnight text, another small moment of connection that would add to their ever-growing collection of love. In his dreams, Jeremy saw their future stretching out before them, filled with good night texts and good morning kisses and all the small, precious moments that make a life together. He saw them growing old together, still texting each other good night even when they were lying side by side in the same bed, still choosing each other every single day. And in the apartment next door, Andrew was dreaming the same dreams, his phone resting on his chest where Jeremy's message still glowed on the screen. Two hearts beating in rhythm, two lives intertwined, two people who had found in each other everything they had ever been looking for. The goodnight text would continue, Jeremy knew, for as long as they both drew breath. They were more than words on a screen now. They were a promise, a prayer, a daily celebration of the love that had transformed them both from lonely individuals into partners, into a family, into home. As the weeks turned into months, the goodnight ritual deepened even further. What had started as simple messages had evolved into something almost sacred between them. Jeremy began to notice patterns in Andrew's texts, the way certain phrases would appear when Andrew was stressed about school, or how the messages would grow longer and more poetic when he was feeling particularly romantic. Tonight, something felt different. There was a weight to Andrew's words that Jeremy couldn't quite identify, an undercurrent of emotion that seemed bigger than their usual exchanges. Jeremy found himself staring at his phone long after their conversation had ended, trying to decode the meaning behind Andrew's messages. The next morning brought clarity. Jeremy woke to find Andrew already up, sitting at their small kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that was both nervous and excited. "Good morning, beautiful," Andrew said, his voice soft in the morning light. "Good morning," Jeremy replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "You're up early," Andrew smiled, the kind of smile that made Jeremy's heart skip beats. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I kept thinking about something." Jeremy settled into the chair across from him, suddenly alert. "What kind of something?" Andrew drew a reach across the table and took Jeremy's hand, his thumb brushing across Jeremy's knuckles, in the gentle way that always made Jeremy feel cherished. "I've been thinking about our goodnight texts," Andrew said, "about how they've become this constant in our lives, this thing that connects us every single day." Jeremy nodded, not sure where this was going, but sensing its importance. "And I realized something," Andrew continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "Those texts aren't just good night messages anymore. They're promises. Every night we promise each other that we'll be here tomorrow, that we'll choose each other again, that our love will continue." Jeremy felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's beautiful," he said softly. Andrew squeezed his hand. "I want to make those promises official," he said. "I want to promise you forever, not just tonight." It took Jeremy a moment to understand what Andrew was saying. When realization dawned, his breath caught in his throat. Andrew stood up, still holding Jeremy's hand, and slowly dropped to one knee beside their kitchen table. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box that made Jeremy's heart stop entirely. "Jeremy Gutierrez," Andrew said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You changed my life the moment you let me sit at your table in that library. You taught me what love really means, what it feels like to be completely understood and accepted and cherished. You've been my good night and my good morning, my comfort and my adventure, my best friend and my greatest love." Tears were streaming down Jeremy's face now, but he couldn't look away from Andrew's eyes, couldn't break the spell of this perfect moment. "I want to text you goodnight for the rest of our lives," Andrew continued. "I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to build a life with you, a family with you, a future that's bigger and more beautiful than anything I ever imagined possible." Andrew opened the box, revealing a simple gold band that caught the morning light and threw it back in brilliant flashes. "Will you marry me, Jeremy?" Andrew asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Will you be my husband, my partner, my forever?" Jeremy couldn't speak. The words were trapped in his throat by the overwhelming surge of love and joy and gratitude that filled every cell of his being. Instead, he nodded frantically, tears making everything blurry except for Andrew's face, Andrew's smile, Andrew's love. "Yes," Jeremy finally managed to say. "Yes, yes. 1,000 times, yes. Andrew slipped the ring onto Jeremy's finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled Jeremy into his arms. They kissed through their tears, tasting salt and joy and the promise of forever. I love you so much, Andrew whispered against Jeremy's lips. I love you too, Jeremy whispered back. I can't believe this is real. They held each other in their small kitchen as the morning light painted everything golden. Two people who had found in each other the answer to every question they had ever asked about love. That night, their goodnight text exchange took on new meaning. Jeremy stared at the ring on his finger as he typed, still hardly believing that Andrew was going to be his husband. Good night, my fiancé, Andrew texted, and Jeremy could practically hear the smile in the words. Good night, my future husband, Jeremy replied, the words feeling both familiar and wonderfully new. I can't wait to marry you, Andrew wrote. I can't wait to be your husband, Jeremy responded. Sweet dreams, my love, Andrew texted. Sweet dreams, my forever, Jeremy replied. The engagement brought a new dimension to their relationship, a sense of permanence and commitment that felt both thrilling and deeply comforting. They threw themselves into wedding planning with enthusiasm, choosing a small ceremony in the campus chapel where they had shared so many quiet moments together. Their families had been overjoyed at the news. Jeremy's parents had welcomed Andrew as a son from the moment they met him, and Andrew's parents had grown to love Jeremy deeply over the years since Andrew had come out. The wedding would be a celebration not just of Jeremy and Andrew's love, but of the families they had built together. The goodnight texts continued throughout their engagement, but now they carried the weight of wedding planning, of shared dreams for their future, of the excitement of becoming husbands. Good night, soon to be Mr. Watson, Andrew would text, since Jeremy had decided to take Andrew's last name. Good night, soon to be my husband, Jeremy would respond, the words never losing their magic no matter how many times he typed them. They talked about their honeymoon, about the apartment they wanted to find after graduation, about the careers they hoped to build and the adventures they wanted to share. Every conversation felt like another thread in the tapestry of their life together. Another reason to be grateful for the love they had found. The night before their wedding, they had decided to spend apart, honoring the tradition even though it felt strange after years of falling asleep together. Jeremy stayed in their apartment while Andrew went to stay with his parents at their hotel. That night's goodnight text exchange was different from all the others, weighted with anticipation and emotion. Good night, my love, Andrew texted. Tomorrow I get to marry my best friend. Good night, sweetheart, Jeremy replied. Tomorrow I get to become your husband. I can't wait to see you at the altar, Andrew wrote. I can't wait to say I do, Jeremy responded. Sweet dreams, Jeremy Watson, Andrew texted, using Jeremy's soon-to-be new name. Sweet dreams, Andrew Watson, Jeremy replied, and they were both crying as they typed. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with golden autumn lights streaming through the chapel windows. Jeremy stood at the altar in his best suit, watching as Andrew walked down the aisle toward him, and felt like his heart might burst from happiness. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love and cherish and support each other through whatever life might bring. When the officiant pronounced them married, they kissed as husbands for the first time, and Jeremy felt like he was floating. The reception was small but joyful, filled with family and friends who had supported their relationship from the beginning. They danced their first dance to the song that had been playing on the radio the night they first kissed, and Jeremy felt like he was living in a fairy tale. That night in their honeymoon suite, they continued their goodnight ritual as married men. Good night, husband, Andrew texted from the bathroom while Jeremy changed into his pajamas. Good night, husband, Jeremy texted back from the bedroom, and they both laughed at the silliness and sweetness of it. When Andrew emerged from the bathroom, he found Jeremy sitting on the bed with his phone, reading through their old messages. What are you doing, Andrew asked, settling beside him. Reading our story, Jeremy said softly. Look at this. He showed Andrew the screen, scrolling through years of goodnight texts, from those early tentative messages to the passionate declarations of their engagement to tonight's simple exchange as husbands. We wrote a love story, Jeremy said wonderfully, one text at a time. Andrew wrapped his arms around Jeremy, pulling him close. The most beautiful love story ever told, he agreed. They spent their honeymoon reading through their messages, reliving their relationship through the lens of their nightly ritual. It was like reading a novel where they were both the authors and the main characters, a story of love that had grown from friendship into something eternal. Married life settled around them like a comfortable blanket. They found a new apartment, bigger than their student housing, with room for an office and a proper kitchen and a bed big enough for two people and a cat. Sunshine approved of the new space immediately, claiming the sunny spot by the living room window as her own. The goodnight text continued, now carrying the weight of shared responsibilities, of building a life together as husbands. They texted about grocery lists and bill paying and whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. But they also texted about dreams and hopes and the small daily miracles of married life. Good night, my husband, who left me love notes in my lunch, Andrew would text. Good night, my husband, who surprised me with flowers just because, Jeremy would respond. Their text became a record of their marriage, documenting the ways they cared for each other, the small gestures that kept their love alive and growing. Jeremy treasured these messages even more than the passionate declarations of their early relationship because they showed the daily choice to love, the commitment that went deeper than emotion. Years passed, bringing changes and challenges and joys. They graduated, found weeds, bought a house. They adopted another cat, a dignified black female they named Luna, who immediately established herself as the queen of their household. They traveled together, exploring new cities and countries, always texting each other goodnight no matter where in the world they were. Good night from Paris, Andrew would text when business trips took him away. Good night from home, Jeremy would respond, counting the hours until you're back. The ritual sustained them through difficult times, too. When Jeremy's father passed away unexpectedly, Andrew's goodnight texts became anchors of comfort in the storm of grief. Good night, my love, Andrew would text. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together. Good night, Jeremy would respond, the simple exchange a reminder that he wasn't alone, that love remained even in the darkest moments. When Andrew struggled with a difficult period at work, Jeremy's messages became daily affirmations of his worth and talent. Good night, my brilliant husband, Jeremy would text. Tomorrow will be better. I believe in you. Good night, my anchor, Andrew would respond. Thank you for keeping me steady. Their 10th wedding anniversary arrived with little fanfare, just a quiet dinner at home and the exchange of simple gifts. But that night's text exchange carried the weight of a decade together, of all the good nights they had shared and all the ones still to come. Good night, my husband of 10 years, Andrew texted. Good night, my partner for life, Jeremy responded. 10 years of good night texts, Andrew wrote. Thousands of little love letters, and thousands more to come, Jeremy replied. They had started talking about children around this time, about adoption or surrogacy, about the family they wanted to build together. The goodnight text began to carry these dreams too, wishes for the future that felt both exciting and terrifying. Good night, future dad, Andrew would text after particularly intense conversations about parenthood. Good night, future papa, Jeremy would respond, the words making his heart race with anticipation. When they finally brought their daughter home, a beautiful baby girl they named Emma, the goodnight text took on new meaning. They were exhausted new parents, taking turns with midnight feedings and diaper changes, but they still found time for their ritual. Good night, Daddy, Andrew would text from the nursery during his turn with the baby. Good night, Papa, Jeremy would respond from their bedroom, where he was trying to catch a few hours of sleep. Emma grew, and their family expanded again with the adoption of their son David. The house filled with the sounds of children's laughter, with toys and books and the beautiful chaos of family life. The goodnight texts became shorter during this period, often just quick exchanges between exhausted parents. Good night, love, Andrew would text. Good night, Jeremy would respond. But even in their brevity, the messages carried the same weight of love and commitment they always had. If anything, they became more precious during the busy years of early parenthood, small moments of connection between two people who were building something beautiful together. As the children grew older, the goodnight texts evolved again. Now they included updates about school events and soccer games, proud parent moments, and concerns about teenage drama. Emma and David became characters in their nightly exchanges, the center of their shared world. Goodnight, husband of the father of the year, Andrew would text after Jeremy spent hours helping Emma with her science fair project. Goodnight, husband of the coach who made David believe in himself, Jeremy would respond after Andrew's patient work with their son's baseball skills. The text documented their children's milestones, their own growth as parents, the deepening of their love as they watched their family flourish. Jeremy saved every message, creating a digital scrapbook of their life together that he treasured more than any photo album. When Emma left for college, their goodnight texts carried the bittersweet ache of parents watching their children grow up and move away. "Good night, fellow empty nester," Andrew texted on Emma's first night in her dorm room. "Good night, proud papa," Jeremy responded. "We raised an amazing daughter. She'll be fine," Andrew wrote. "We taught her well." "We did good," Jeremy agreed. "Now what do we do with ourselves?" The question led to new adventures, new dreams for the phase of life they were entering. With David still in high school but increasingly independent, Jeremy and Andrew found themselves rediscovering each other as a couple, not just as parents. They traveled more, took up new hobbies, spent long evenings talking about books and movies and the state of the world. Their goodnight texts became longer again, more reflective, carrying the wisdom of people who had built a life together and were now enjoying the fruits of their labor. "Good night, my partner in this beautiful life," Andrew would text. "Good night, my companion through all seasons," Jeremy would respond. When David graduated and left for college, they faced true empty nest syndrome for the first time in over 20 years. The house felt too quiet, too big, too empty without the constant motion of children's lives. But their good night texts reminded them that they still had each other, that their love story was far from over. "Good night, husband of 25 years," Andrew texted on their anniversary. "Good night, love of my life," Jeremy responded. "Here's to 25 more." They downsized to a smaller house, one with a garden where Jeremy could grow vegetables and flowers. They adopted 2 rescue dogs, golden retrievers named Sunny and Cloud, who filled the house with energy and joy. They settled into the rhythm of their mature love, comfortable and deep and enduring. The goodnight text continued, now carrying the weight of decades together, of a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. They texted about grandchildren they hoped to have someday, about retirement plans, about growing old together. "Good night, my forever person," Andrew would text. "Good night, my heart," Jeremy would respond. Their friends marveled at their relationship, at the obvious love and affection they still shared after so many years together. Jeremy would smile when people asked for their secret, knowing that there wasn't just one thing that had kept them together. But the good night texts were part of it, he knew. The daily choice to connect, to share, to remind each other of their love. The simple ritual that had become the thread running through their entire relationship, binding them together across time and distance and all of life's changes. As they entered their 60s, the goodnight texts took on new poignancy. They were both healthy and active, but they were also aware of time's passage in a way they hadn't been when they were younger. Every goodnight felt more precious, every exchange a gift to be treasured. "Good night, my love," Andrew would text, the words carrying the weight of decades. "Good night, my heart," Jeremy would respond, meaning it more than ever. Emma married a wonderful man and gave them their first grandchild, a little boy named James who looked exactly like Jeremy had as a baby. David followed suit a few years later, marrying his college sweetheart and blessing them with twin daughters. The goodnight texts began to include updates about grandchildren, proud grandparent moments that filled their hearts with joy. "Good night, Grandpa Jeremy," Andrew would text after a day of babysitting. "Good night, Grandpa Andrew," Jeremy would respond. "Those kids are lucky to have you." They were lucky to have each other, Jeremy reflected often. Lucky to have found love so young, lucky to have built a life together, lucky to be growing old side by side. The goodnight text had become a record of that luck, a documentation of a love story that had exceeded every dream they had ever dared to dream. When Andrew was diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer, the goodnight texts became lifelines. The treatment was successful, but the scare reminded them both of their mortality, of the preciousness of every day they had together. "Good night, my brave husband," Jeremy would text during Andrew's treatment. "Good night, my rock," Andrew would respond. "I couldn't do this without you." They got through it together as they had gotten through everything else. The cancer went into remission, and their good night texts returned to their usual tone of love and gratitude and shared life. "Good night, cancer survivor," Jeremy would text sometimes, teasing gently. "Good night, husband of a cancer survivor." Andrew would respond. Thank you for never leaving my side. They retired within a year of each other, suddenly finding themselves with all the time in the world to spend together. It was an adjustment, learning to be together constantly after decades of busy careers, but they navigated it with the same patience and love they had brought to every other transition in their relationship. Their good night texts during retirement became more philosophical, more reflective of their life together and their hopes for whatever time remained. Good night, partner of 40 years, Andrew texted on their anniversary. Good night, love of my lifetime, Jeremy responded. 40 years and it still feels like the beginning. It did feel like the beginning in many ways. They were discovering new aspects of each other, new interests and dreams and ways of being together. They volunteered at a local literacy program, traveled to places they had always wanted to see, spent hours reading together in their garden. The goodnight text documented this new phase of their relationship, the contentment and joy of people who had built something lasting and beautiful together. Good night, my traveling companion, Andrew would text from their hotel room in Italy. Good night, my adventure partner, Jeremy would respond from the bed beside him. As they moved through their 70s, the goodnight texts became even more precious. They were both dealing with the minor health issues that came with age, but they faced them together, supporting each other through doctor's appointments and medication schedules and the gradual slowing down that time demanded. Good night, my caregiver, Andrew would text when Jeremy helped him remember his medications. Good night, my patient, Jeremy would respond when Andrew helped him with his physical therapy exercises. They had become each other's everything in the way that couples who have been together for decades often do. They knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken, could communicate with a glance across a room, moved through their days in perfect synchronization. But the goodnight text remained important, a ritual that connected them to their younger selves and to the love that had sustained them through everything. Good night, husband of 50 years, Andrew texted on their golden anniversary. Good night, my golden love, Jeremy responded. 50 years of good nights, and I still look forward to every one. Their children and grandchildren had thrown them a party for their anniversary, filling their house with family and friends and the warm chaos of celebration. Jeremy had looked around at the life they had built together, at the people who existed because of their love, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, as they settled into bed together in their quiet house, surrounded by photos and memories and the detritus of a life well lived, their goodnight text exchange carried extra weight. Thank you, Andrew texted simply. For what? Jeremy responded. For everything, Andrew wrote. For saying yes in that library all those years ago. For loving me through everything. For building this beautiful life with me. Jeremy felt tears on his cheeks as he typed his response. Thank you for changing my life. Thank you for being my home. Thank you for 50 years of good nights. And here's to 50 more, Andrew replied. Jeremy smiled through his tears. Here's to forever, he typed back. They were both in their 80s now, moving more slowly but still together, still choosing each other every day. The goodnight texts had become shorter, sometimes just a simple heart emoji when arthritis made typing difficult. But they never missed a night, never broke the chain that had connected them for over 60 years. Good night, my everything, Andrew would text. Good night, my always, Jeremy would respond. Jeremy often thought about their collection of messages, the digital archive of their love story that spanned decades. Tens of thousands of goodnight texts, each one a small declaration of love, a daily choice to stay connected, a promise to be there tomorrow. He thought about young Jeremy sitting in that library so many years ago, lonely and uncertain about his future. He wished he could tell that young man what was coming, the love that would transform his life, the family he would build, the happiness that would be his. But maybe it was better that he hadn't known. Maybe the surprise of it, the gradual unfolding of their love story, was part of what made it so beautiful. The goodnight texts continued, night after night, year after year. They were the thread that ran through their entire relationship, the constant that had remained unchanged even as everything else evolved around them. Good night, my love, Andrew texted on a random Tuesday night in their 83rd year. Good night, my heart, Jeremy responded, as he had thousands of times before. Sweet dreams, my forever, Andrew wrote. Sweet dreams, my always, Jeremy replied. Jeremy set his phone on his nightstand and reached for Andrew's hand in the darkness. After all these years, after all these good nights, He still felt the same flutter of happiness at their nightly exchange. He still felt grateful for the love they had found, the life they had built, the simple miracle of being chosen by someone and choosing them back every single day. Tomorrow would bring another goodnight text, another small moment of connection, another thread in the tapestry of their love. And Jeremy would be ready for it, as he had been ready for every goodnight for over 60 years. In the darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by the quiet sounds of their shared life, Jeremy closed his eyes and drifted towards sleep, secure in the knowledge that he was loved, that he had loved well, and that tomorrow would bring another opportunity to say goodnight to the person who had made his life complete. The goodnight texts would continue, Jeremy knew, for as long as they both drew breath. They were more than words now, more than a ritual or a habit. They were the language of a love that had endured everything, the daily prayer of two hearts that had found their home in each other. Good night, Jeremy thought as sleep took him. Good night to the love of my life, to the father of my children, to my partner in everything. Good night to 60 years of good nights, and to all the good nights still to come. And in the bed beside him, Andrew was thinking the same thoughts, holding the same gratitude, feeling the same overwhelming love that had sustained them through a lifetime of good nights and would sustain them through whatever good nights remained. Their love story, written one text at a time, continued into the peaceful darkness of another night, another good night, another small miracle of love that had lasted a lifetime and would last forever.